Well, now I'm going to tie a Parachute Hackled Red Spinner on a number 15 TMCO 102Y hook, one of my favourite hooks. It's an excellent hook, using the nylon loop method to tie on the hackle. So I have already whipped the hook around to the bend of the hook, and I'll now tie in a tail, and the tail is just a ginger hackle. There's a piece of ginger hackle, and I'll just take a little clump of fibres in the usual way and tie them in. Now the way I do that is I grab them in the right hand, hold them on top of the hook to get the length about right, and red spinners have a long tail. I then change hands and whip it on, up the near side, down the far side a couple of times so it's on top of the hook, and it is. Then wind back round the bend of the hook to where, just around the bend, and then go under the tail a couple of times to make sure it cocks up a little bit. There it is, it's a bit not going, there it is. And then tie that off and cut off the waist. Now for these flies I have a number of different bodies, but I find a seal's fur body, a dub seal's fur body, are very good, with a scarlet body and a darker thorax. So I dub this in my usual way using loon sticky wax, put a bit on the thread to make it a bit sticky, a little bit on my finger to make it a bit sticky, and I have this seal's fur here, which I take hopefully the right amount, which I sometimes get right, and just dub that on in the usual way. Now seal's fur is difficult to dub, so that's why a little bit of stickiness on your thumb and finger is good. So there's that, and then I use my dubbing tool, which I made from a little handle and a safety pin, and I hook that below where the fur is, and then go back up along it, and then towards the front of the hook, and then I spin that, and that spinning it sort of locks all that fur into that tying loop, which go around a couple of times before you really wind it tightly, because it often breaks at the point if you wind it too thick. And when you get it nice and tight like this, then just wind the body in the usual way and slightly taper it to the front. Now I'm having a bit of trouble because the camera's only 4 inches or 5 inches from the work, and I'm bumping it with the my dubbing tool. Anyway, we're getting there, and just work to the front, a nice slightly tapering body. Don't go too close to the eye, that's close enough, because there's a whole lot of stuff to be done there. They've got to put in the loop and tie on the hackle, and then tie that off. Okay, and cut away any excess. Now, the next thing we do is we tie in the nylon loop. Now this nylon is a fine tippet material, which I don't like. It's difficult to use. I just use a Water Queen or one of the other thicker, heavier weights, but in about two pounds, and tie the line, you probably can't see that, on top of the hook at the thorax. Go over it. Make sure it's on the top, then that's right, and then tie it on really tightly, because if that comes off the fly, you'll have to start again. And put that out of the way and cut off this waist. Now the nylon loop I'm talking about is I bring down the Gallows tool there and put it there, and then I take this nylon, you can just see it I think, and go through the Gallows tool and down, and that makes a loop of nylon. Now just 2 turns around the bottom end, the taily end of that, so that you can pull it tight, which we'll do later on, and then put that out of the way. Okay, and then I tie in a hackle, and I'm just using a standard cock hackle. I'd use a whiting hackle if I had a big enough one in this colour, but I haven't. That's just a beautiful old cock hackle I've had for decades. And here's a feather I've selected from it. I've already cleaned it up, taken off the stuff at the bottom, the woolly stuff, fibres, and you tie that in with the shiny side down, upside down if you prefer to call it, in front of that loop. Being careful not to involve the loop in any of these windings or you'll make it so the loop won't work. And tie that in really strongly, because if that comes out, you've got another problem. That's in, cut off the waste, and they're using a pair of hackle pliers. Tie the we have to put in a little thorax, and I use a slightly darker thorax, same seals fur, but this is a sort of a clarity colour, because the thorax of the spinners is darker than the body. And it is very important that you have a thorax, because it's the silhouette of this fly is important. It's one of the triggers, I think. So just dub that in the normal way, as I did the rest of the body, and just make a nice little thorax, being careful that it doesn't fall off the hook, which it sometimes does. And you just make a thorax around the loop. Okay, like that. And then tie that off at the front, and that's a very nice little thorax. Just a couple of turns, or 3 turns around that. Oops. And then cut that waste off. Okay. And then take your hackle pliers. These Japanese hackle pliers are excellent, but anything does. And wind that around that loop, okay? And wind it as close to the body of the fly as you can. It's difficult, and it goes all over the place at first, but once it settles down, it's right. And just wind it around that loop. And keep winding, it might take 5 or 6 winds to get sufficient fibre to give you a nice parachute hackle. And that's probably enough. And then, when you've got enough, just nip that down and push that through, push the hackle through the loop, grab it and pull it down, and then put the hackle pliers back on it and hold it down. So you can see what we've done so far. And then you take the tail end of this nylon, remove the nylon loop from the Gallows tool, and there it is, it's fell off. There it is. Pull that down, and then pull the Gallows tool. See, that's now too tight, but it's going to work. Okay, and that holds the hackle from unwinding. That ties the hackle in. Lift that up and cut off the waste. You don't want a big lump of that there, so you just nip that off like that. And that's the fly. Then we've just got to tie off the nylon, pull that out of the way, and just tie the nylon off so that it doesn't unwind. And then I would normally cut that nylon off there, like that, and then do a whip finish, a standard whip finish underneath the parachute hackle. Only go around 3 turns is enough. 2, 3. Dubby needle again, of course. Pull that tight. So that's tight. Cut off the surplus. And then I get this wonderful glue again, and I squash the hackle down absolutely flat, the way I want it, and then put a dob of this glue, just a tiny little bit there, and I always put a little bit just on there, which stops that coming undone. Stops that. Okay, and then taking I have a very fine dubbing needle here somewhere. which I can't see, but this one will do. I always take the fly out of there on a dubbing needle because there's often glue in the eye of the hook and you don't want to spend all day trying to undo glue. So there it is. That is a very elegant fly. There's very little to it. You can sort this hackle out a bit. But once you start casting it, it becomes nicely even. And it is an absolutely lethal fly in the McLaughlin and rivers like that, when and on the lakes down south and in Tasmania, when the red spinner are in the air, the spinners are in the air, and the spent spinners are on the water. So thank you.